$1,840. The invoice slipped from Vanessa Prescott's fingers. It drifted through the air. Turned once. Then landed face up on the polished marble floor. Silence filled the ballroom. Nearly 50 guests watched without saying a word. Vanessa looked at the mechanic standing in front of her. His work boots still carried dust from the repair shop. Grease stained the sleeves of his faded blue shirt. She smiled. If it matters that much. She pointed toward the floor. Pick it up. No one laughed. No one moved. Miles Mercer lowered his eyes. Not to the paper. To the number. $1,840. 3 weeks of honest work. 3 weeks of promises. 3 weeks he had already counted on. Because that money wasn't buying him a better life. It was buying his mother one more chance to stay alive. Vanessa waited. So? Aren't you going to pick it up? Miles slowly bent down. He picked up the invoice. Straightened the folded corner. Brushed away a tiny speck of dust. Then looked at Vanessa. His voice remained calm. I hope. No one you love ever has to depend on the kindness of someone who enjoys watching people suffer. He placed the invoice back onto his clipboard. Turned around. And walked toward the front door. No shouting. No insults. No threats. 20 months later. That same woman would stand in front of the same mechanic. Begging him to save the only person she couldn't bear to lose. Life has a strange way of remembering the moments we wish everyone else would forget. I've lived long enough to know that humiliation doesn't always leave the deepest scar on the person receiving it. Sometimes it quietly begins destroying the person who chooses to give it. As Miles reached the door, an elderly businessman gently set down his champagne glass. A woman near the piano lowered her eyes. Even the violinist had stopped playing. Something inside that ballroom had changed. Not because Miles had been humiliated. Because everyone had silently realized. Money had just lost to dignity. 30 minutes earlier. Miles sat inside his 15-year-old Ford pickup outside the Prescott estate. The heater blew cold air. The fuel needle hovered just above empty. On the passenger seat rested a white envelope from St. Vincent Medical Center. Final payment reminder. Due today. His phone buzzed. Hi, Mom. Miriam Mercer's voice sounded tired. But she smiled through every word. Did you make it? I'm here. You don't have to argue with them. I'm not going to. I'm only collecting what they promised. A gentle silence followed. Then she asked. Are you worried? Miles looked through the windshield at the enormous mansion. The stone columns. The luxury cars. The guests arriving in evening gowns and tailored suits. I'm not worried about asking for my money. He paused. I'm worried that I'll come back too late. Neither of them mentioned the hospital. Neither of them mentioned the treatment waiting for that payment. Miriam already understood. My son. No amount of money is worth losing the man you've worked so hard to become. Miles smiled. I know. He ended the call. Picked up the clipboard. Took one slow breath. He believed he was walking into a mansion to collect an unpaid invoice. He had no idea. He was walking toward the single moment that would divide the rest of his life into 2 chapters. Miles didn't drive straight back to the hospital. He couldn't. Not yet. He parked beneath an old oak tree 3 blocks away from the Prescott estate. The engine ticked quietly as it cooled. His hands remained on the steering wheel. The invoice rested on the passenger seat. Still worth $1,840. Still unpaid. His phone lit up again. It wasn't his mother. It was St. Vincent Medical Center. He let it ring twice before answering. Mr. Mercer? Yes. This is Karen from Patient Financial Services. We wanted to remind you that today's payment deadline is 5 o'clock. Miles glanced at the dashboard clock. 3:38. I understand. We'll do our best. Karen hesitated. I know this isn't easy. If anything changes, please call us. We'll note your account. Thank you. The call ended. The truck suddenly felt much smaller. For a few seconds, Miles simply stared through the windshield. Then he folded the invoice carefully. Not because it mattered anymore. Because his mother had taught him that honest work deserved respect. Even when other people refused to give it. Sometimes people think dignity disappears the moment someone humiliates us. I've found the opposite to be true. Dignity isn't something another person can take away. It's something we decide not to surrender, even when the world gives us every excuse to let it go. Miles started the truck. Instead of driving to the hospital, he drove to Mercer Auto Repair. The small garage sat between a laundromat and an aging hardware store. The paint was faded. The sign leaned slightly to one side. But every customer in the neighborhood knew one thing. If Miles repaired your car, it stayed repaired. Tyler Jenkins, his 20-year-old apprentice, looked up as the truck rolled in. You're back already. Miles smiled. The party ended early. Tyler noticed the expression on his face. They didn't pay you. Miles quietly shook his head. Tyler slammed a wrench onto the workbench. I knew those rich people couldn't be trusted. We should take them to court. Miles removed his work gloves. Maybe. But getting angry won't help Mom today. Before Tyler could answer, an old pickup slowly pulled into the lot. Behind the wheel sat Mr. Harold Donnelly. 78 years old. Retired Army veteran. Regular customer for nearly a decade. He climbed out carefully. Miles. I hate bothering you. My truck started making that noise again. Miles smiled immediately. Let's take a look. Within minutes, he found the problem. A loose belt tensioner. 5-minute repair. He tightened the bolt. Started the engine. The rattling disappeared. Harold reached for his wallet. How much do I owe you? Miles wiped his hands. Nothing. It only took a few minutes. Harold frowned. No. Your time is worth something. Miles smiled. So is yours. Harold looked at him for several seconds. Then quietly folded the money back into his wallet. As he prepared to leave, he glanced toward the unopened hospital envelope lying on Miles's toolbox. He didn't ask questions. He simply said, My generation learned something a long time ago. The strongest people are usually carrying the heaviest loads. Then he drove away. Tyler watched the truck disappear. You could have used that money. Miles looked toward the road. I know. Tyler frowned. Then why didn't you take it? Miles picked up another wrench. Because if I start charging people for kindness, I'll forget why I became a mechanic in the first place. Neither of them noticed. Across the street, a silver Lincoln sedan had been parked there for almost 10 minutes. Inside sat an elderly woman. Elegant. Quiet. Watching the little garage through the windshield. She had seen everything. And before the sun went down, she was about to walk through that garage door. An elderly woman stepped out of the silver Lincoln. She didn't hurry. She didn't wave. She simply crossed the street carrying a small leather handbag. Tyler looked up first. Can I help you, ma'am? She smiled politely. I'm looking for the owner. Miles walked over and wiped his hands on a clean shop towel. That would be me. My name is Miles Mercer. The woman studied him for a moment. Not his clothes. Not the grease on his hands. His eyes. I watched you from across the street. Tyler exchanged a quick glance with Miles. The woman continued. You repaired that gentleman's truck. You refused his money. Miles nodded. It was only a loose tensioner. It didn't feel right charging him. She smiled again. My name is Pearl Whitaker. I'm afraid my car has a problem. She pointed toward the silver Lincoln. It stalled twice this morning. Miles grabbed his scanner. I'll take a look. Within minutes, he diagnosed the issue. A failing ignition coil. Not difficult. But the replacement part wasn't in stock. I can have it ready tomorrow afternoon. Pearl asked. And if I needed it tonight? Miles hesitated. I could drive across town and pick up the part myself. It'll take about an hour. She nodded. Then that's what we'll do. As Tyler prepared the work order, Pearl noticed the folded hospital envelope still resting on the workbench. She didn't reach for it. She didn't ask about it. Instead, she asked something else. Have you eaten today? Miles laughed softly. I'll grab something later. When? After work. Pearl looked at the clock. It was already after 4. I don't think later is a real meal. She smiled gently. Humor an old woman. There's a diner 2 blocks away. I'll buy dinner. Miles immediately shook his head. That's kind of you. But I couldn't. You don't even know me. Pearl answered without missing a beat. I know enough. Sometimes the people who change our lives don't arrive carrying answers. They arrive carrying attention. They notice the things everyone else walks past. A tired smile. An unopened envelope. An empty stomach. Kindness often begins long before anyone offers help. It begins the moment someone truly sees us. 30 minutes later. They sat in a quiet corner booth at Maggie's family diner. Pearl ordered meatloaf. Miles chose the cheapest item on the menu. A bowl of vegetable soup. Pearl looked at the waitress. And add the roast turkey dinner. Miles frowned. I didn't order that. I know. You need something more than soup. He smiled politely. I really can't let you spend that much. Pearl leaned back. Mr. Mercer. You've spent your entire day trying to protect everyone else's dignity. Please allow me to protect yours for one meal. Miles didn't argue again. Halfway through dinner, Pearl finally asked the question she had avoided all afternoon. The envelope. Hospital? Miles quietly nodded. My mother. Cancer treatment. The payment was due today. Pearl lowered her fork. And the woman at the mansion? Miles looked out the window before answering. She decided paying me wasn't as entertaining as embarrassing me. Pearl remained silent. Then she reached into her handbag. She removed a plain white envelope. Placed it gently beside his coffee cup. Miles looked at it. What is this? Open it. Inside. Lay 18 crisp $100 bills. Exactly $1,800. Miles looked up immediately. I can't accept this. Pearl smiled. I wasn't asking whether you could. I was asking whether you'll trust that someday you'll do the same for someone else. Before Miles could answer, his phone rang. The caller ID read, St. Vincent Medical Center. St. Vincent Medical Center. The words on Miles's phone froze him in place. He looked at Pearl. Then answered immediately. This is Miles. Karen's voice sounded calmer this time. Mr. Mercer. I wanted to let you know we've extended the payment deadline until tomorrow morning. Miles closed his eyes. Relief washed over him. Thank you. I truly appreciate that. After the call ended, he looked down at the white envelope again. $1,800. Exactly what he needed. Almost. He slowly pushed it back across the table. Pearl didn't touch it. Why? Miles smiled apologetically. Because it isn't mine. I didn't earn it. I can't solve one honest problem by accepting money I haven't worked for. Pearl studied him for several quiet seconds. Then, she smiled. For the first time that evening. A real smile. I was hoping you'd say that. Miles looked confused. You were? Pearl nodded. That envelope wasn't a gift. It was a test. She slipped the cash back into her handbag. Then reached inside once more. This time, she placed a business card on the table. Whitaker Industrial Supply. President. Pearl Whitaker. I own one of the largest independent auto parts distributors in northern Ohio. Miles blinked. You do? I do. And tomorrow morning, I'd like to offer you something much more valuable than $1,800. Sometimes life has an unusual way of answering our prayers. We ask for enough money to survive another week. Instead, we're handed an opportunity that could change the next 20 years. The difficult part is recognizing the difference before fear convinces us to settle for less. The next morning, Miles arrived at Whitaker Industrial Supply just before 8. The warehouse stretched nearly the length of 2 football fields. Forklifts moved between towering shelves stacked with engines, transmissions, and thousands of neatly labeled parts. Pearl met him at the front entrance. No interviews. No paperwork. Just walk with me. For nearly an hour. She introduced him to supervisors, drivers, warehouse managers. Everyone greeted her with genuine respect. Not because she owned the company. Because she knew every employee by name. Finally, she stopped beside a large storage area. I've been hearing something interesting. She looked at Miles. Repair shops keep asking for honest mechanics. They're harder to find than good engines. Miles laughed quietly. That sounds about right. Pearl handed him a ring of keys. There are 2 conditions. Miles frowned. What conditions? First, you buy every part for your garage from us. He smiled. That seems fair. Second, when cash flow gets tight, you don't stop fixing cars. You call me. Miles stared at the keys. I don't understand. Pearl answered softly. I'll extend your credit. No interest. No penalties. You pay when your customers pay. Tyler nearly dropped the clipboard he was holding. Miles. Do you know what this means? Miles did. For the first time since opening his little garage. He wouldn't have to choose between buying parts and paying his mother's medical bills. 3 months later, Mercer Auto Repair had doubled its customer list. People came because of honest prices. They stayed because Miles treated every customer like a neighbor. One afternoon, a young mother arrived with 2 children in the back seat. Her brakes had failed inspection. She lowered her voice. I can only afford the front pads today. Miles checked the estimate. Then quietly crossed out one line. What are you doing? I'm replacing all 4. But I can't pay for that. I know. She stared at him. Why would you do that? Miles smiled. Because somebody once reminded me. That kindness isn't supposed to stop with the person who receives it. Neither of them noticed. A black luxury SUV had just pulled into the parking lot. Inside, Vanessa Prescott slowly lowered her sunglasses. She wasn't there to apologize. She wasn't even there to see Miles. She was there to buy the entire block where his garage stood. Vanessa Prescott never stepped out of the SUV. She didn't need to. From behind the tinted glass, she watched customers coming and going from the small garage. An elderly couple shook Miles's hand before leaving. A delivery driver waved as he pulled away. A young mother hugged her little boy after hearing her car was safe to drive again. Vanessa frowned. She had built companies worth millions. Yet somehow, people looked happier leaving this tiny repair shop than they did leaving her luxury showroom. Her assistant broke the silence. The developer is waiting. Vanessa nodded. Buy every property on this block. The garage too. She looked through the windshield one last time. Especially the garage. She drove away without ever realizing. The mechanic she had humiliated months earlier still had no idea she was about to enter his life again. 3 weeks later, a certified letter arrived. Mercer Auto Repair had 60 days to vacate the property. The entire block had been sold to Prescott Commercial Development. Tyler read the notice twice. This has to be a mistake. Miles quietly folded the letter. It isn't. They bought the building. They have every legal right. Tyler slammed his fist against the workbench. This isn't fair. Miles looked around the garage. The faded walls. The old hydraulic lift. The workbench his father had built 20 years earlier. No. It isn't. But fairness isn't something the law promises. Sometimes the hardest part of losing something isn't the loss itself. It's standing in the same place every day, knowing the clock is quietly counting down. Life doesn't always ask whether we're ready. It simply asks who will become before the door finally closes. The news spread quickly through the neighborhood. Customers began stopping by for reasons that had nothing to do with their cars. Mrs. Alvarez from the bakery brought fresh bread. Mr. Donnelly delivered 2 folding chairs because he noticed the waiting area was getting crowded. A local church dropped off coffee every Friday morning. One afternoon, a man in a business suit walked into the garage carrying a fleet maintenance proposal. Our company has 12 service vans. We've heard about your shop. If you're interested. Miles read the contract. It was worth more than any repair agreement he had ever signed. Tyler grinned. This could save us. Miles smiled for the first time all week. It just might. For the next month, the garage became busier than ever. Customers waited outside before sunrise. Fleet vehicles lined up around the corner. Tyler hired another apprentice. For a brief moment, it almost felt as though determination could outrun reality. Then the bank called. The property owner had accelerated the redevelopment schedule. The building now had to be vacated in 14 days. Not 60. 14. Tyler stared at the phone after Miles hung up. They can't do that. They can. They're paying the penalty to terminate every lease early. That evening, Miles stayed alone in the garage long after everyone else had gone home. He slowly walked from one repair bay to another, running his hand across every tool chest, every lift, every scar in the concrete floor. Each mark carried a memory. His father teaching him to rebuild an engine. His first customer. The day Tyler became his apprentice. The day Pearl handed him a chance instead of charity. Behind him, the front door quietly opened. Pearl stepped inside. She looked around the empty garage. Then at Miles. I heard about the eviction. Miles nodded. I'll figure something out. Pearl smiled gently. I know you will. She reached into her purse, removed a small brass key, and placed it on his toolbox. This is why I came. This is the key to Warehouse 7. Miles looked down at the small brass key. I don't understand. Pearl smiled. It belongs to one of my old distribution buildings. We stopped using it years ago. It has electricity. It has office space. And it has enough room for 6 repair bays. Tyler's eyes grew wide. You want us to move in? Pearl gently shook her head. No. I want you to rent it. Miles looked surprised. Rent it? For $1 a month. Tyler laughed. That's basically free. Pearl looked at him. No. It's called preserving a man's dignity. If I gave it away, it would become charity. If he rents it, it remains his business. Miles quietly placed the key back on the toolbox. I appreciate this more than I can say. But I still have to earn it. Pearl smiled. I knew that would be your answer. She pushed the key back toward him. Then earn it. Build something that will make this old warehouse worth remembering. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't the one that costs the most. It's the one that allows another person to keep believing in themselves. Real generosity doesn't remove responsibility. It simply removes hopelessness. 3 weeks later. Mercer Auto Repair reopened inside Warehouse 7. The walls were unfinished. The paint was peeling. Half the lights still needed replacing. But every lift worked. Every toolbox had a place. Every customer found the same familiar smile waiting for them. Business slowly returned. Then something unexpected happened. A regional delivery company signed a maintenance contract. 24 service vans. The largest agreement Miles had ever received. Tyler couldn't stop smiling. We actually made it. Miles looked around the warehouse. No. We're just getting started. Across town. Vanessa Prescott stood inside the glass conference room of Prescott Automotive Group. Her newest luxury service center had opened on the same street where Miles's old garage once stood. It looked perfect. Marble floors. Italian furniture. Complimentary espresso. Large digital displays. There was only one problem. The repair bays stayed half empty. Her operations manager cleared his throat. Customer satisfaction scores dropped again. Vanessa frowned. How? We built the nicest facility in Cleveland. The reviews aren't about the building. They're about trust. He handed her a printed report. One review caught her attention. I'd rather drive 20 extra miles to Mercer Auto Repair than be treated like a number. Another read. They fix what's broken. They don't invent problems. Then another. Honest people are worth the drive. Vanessa dropped the papers onto the table. Who is Mercer? The room fell silent. Finally. Her assistant answered carefully. The mechanic. The one from your fundraiser. Vanessa stared at him. What mechanic? The man. Whose invoice you threw on the floor. For several long seconds. She said nothing. Not because she felt guilty. Because she couldn't remember his name. To her. He had never been a person. Only a moment. Only an inconvenience. Only someone beneath her attention. Meanwhile. Warehouse 7 continued growing. One Friday afternoon. An elderly man arrived driving a weathered pickup. His transmission had completely failed. He slowly removed his cap. I know I can't afford this. I just wanted an honest opinion. Miles inspected the truck. Then walked back carrying the estimate. He crossed out nearly half the charges. The man looked confused. You forgot something. Miles smiled. No. I removed everything you don't actually need. The old man looked at him for a long moment. Then quietly asked. How do you stay in business treating people like this? Miles smiled. The funny thing is. That's exactly how I stay in business. Neither of them noticed. A black luxury sedan had just parked across the street. Inside sat Randolph Prescott. Vanessa's father. Chairman of Prescott Automotive. He wasn't looking at the building. He was watching the man who had unknowingly begun changing the future of his family. Randolph Prescott remained inside the sedan long after the old pickup had driven away. He watched Miles walk back into the garage. No celebration. No dramatic speech. Just another customer treated with respect. His driver finally broke the silence. Sir. We're going to be late. Randolph nodded. Drive. But instead of heading downtown, he quietly said, come back tomorrow. The next afternoon, he returned. This time in a different vehicle. Older. Less noticeable. He parked across the street again. For nearly 2 hours. He simply watched. A young college student arrived with a dead battery. Miles replaced only the damaged cable instead of the entire assembly. An elderly widow apologized because she could only pay half that week. Miles wrote the balance on a small card. Whenever you're ready. No interest. No pressure. No embarrassment. Randolph had spent 40 years building one of Ohio's largest automotive companies. Yet sitting inside that parked sedan, he realized something uncomfortable. His company repaired cars. Miles repaired trust. Success often teaches us how to build larger businesses. Character teaches us how to build lasting reputations. The two are not always found in the same place, and money alone has never been able to purchase the second. The following Monday, Randolph walked into Warehouse 7. Tyler greeted him. Good morning, sir. Can we help you? Randolph smiled politely. I need someone to look at my truck. Miles rolled a diagnostic cart toward the vehicle. Within 15 minutes, he found the issue. A damaged wheel bearing. Nothing more. Randolph asked. Shouldn't we replace both sides? Miles shook his head. The other one is still in excellent condition. It would just cost you money you don't need to spend. Randolph studied him carefully. And how would I know you're telling the truth? Miles smiled. You wouldn't. That's why trust has to be earned before it's believed. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Randolph quietly extended his hand. My name is Randolph Prescott. Tyler nearly dropped the inspection tablet. Miles recognized the name immediately. Chairman of Prescott Automotive. Vanessa's father. Randolph noticed the brief flicker of recognition. I imagine you've heard of my family. Miles nodded once. I have. I also imagine. My daughter didn't leave you with the best impression. Miles remained calm. I'm not interested in discussing your daughter. I'm interested in fixing your truck. Randolph slowly smiled. There was no bitterness. No attempt to embarrass him. Only quiet professionalism. That impressed him more than any speech could have. As Randolph prepared to leave, he looked back toward the service bays. You've built something remarkable here. Miles answered with a small smile. I had help. Randolph nodded thoughtfully. So did I. When he returned to headquarters, Vanessa was waiting outside his office. Dad. I need approval for another expansion project. Randolph looked at the proposal. Then closed the folder without reading it. Not today. Vanessa frowned. Why? I spent the afternoon visiting someone. Who? A mechanic. She laughed. A mechanic? What could he possibly teach you? Randolph looked directly at his daughter. He reminded me of everything this company has forgotten. Vanessa's smile disappeared. She had never seen her father speak that way before. Behind Randolph's office door, another executive quietly waited. Damian Bradford, Chief Financial Officer. He had overheard every word. And for the first time, he realized the old man had begun looking far more closely at the company than anyone had expected. Damian Bradford didn't like surprises. Especially the kind that made Randolph Prescott start asking questions. For 5 years, Damian had controlled the company's financial reports. Every acquisition. Every construction project. Every inflated invoice. Everything passed through his office. No one had ever looked closely. Until now. The morning after Randolph visited Warehouse 7. Damien quietly walked into Vanessa's office. He closed the door behind him. Your father is changing. Vanessa barely looked up from her laptop. He'll get over it. No. You don't understand. He's asking for internal audits. That caught her attention. She slowly closed the computer. Audits? Damien nodded. Every division. Every contract. Every expansion. Vanessa frowned. So let them audit. If everything's clean. Damien interrupted. It isn't. The room fell silent. Vanessa stared at him. What exactly are you saying? Damien forced a smile. I'm saying. We need to redirect his attention. Meanwhile. Miles knew nothing about any of it. Warehouse 7 had become busier than ever. Every repair bay was full. Tyler had hired 2 additional mechanics. Customers waited patiently because they trusted the work. Late one afternoon. Mrs. Alvarez from the bakery walked through the garage carrying 3 boxes of fresh pastries. For everyone. Tyler laughed. You keep feeding us like this. We'll have to start repairing ovens instead of cars. Everyone smiled. The garage no longer felt like a business. It felt like a neighborhood. Sometimes success arrives so quietly that we mistake it for ordinary life. We become busy solving today's problems without realizing yesterday's kindness has already begun changing tomorrow. Looking back, the biggest turning points rarely announce themselves. They simply arrive disguised as another ordinary day. Just before closing, a black SUV rolled into the service bay. Vanessa stepped out. The entire garage grew quiet. Tyler immediately recognized her. Miles did too. She looked around the warehouse. This is better than I expected. Miles calmly wiped his hands. What can I help you with? My SUV. The check engine light came on. There was no apology. No acknowledgement. Nothing. Only business. Miles connected the diagnostic scanner. 10 minutes later. He handed her the report. A faulty oxygen sensor. Nothing serious. She glanced at the estimate. This seems low. It doesn't need anything else. She folded her arms. Are you sure? Miles nodded. If I charged you for parts you don't need, I'd be no different from the people I dislike. For the first time, Vanessa looked uncomfortable. She reached into her purse. Pulled out her credit card. Then quietly asked. You remember me? Miles smiled politely. I remember the day. I don't spend much time remembering the person. The words weren't cruel. They were calm. That somehow hurt more. Vanessa signed the receipt without another sentence. As she walked back toward her SUV, she stopped. Turned around. I heard your garage was demolished. Miles nodded. It was. I'm sorry. It was barely above a whisper. Miles looked at her for a long moment. Then answered honestly. So was I. She drove away. Tyler watched the SUV disappear. Do you think she meant it? Miles shrugged. I don't know. And honestly, I don't need to. Across town. Randolph sat alone in his office reviewing a stack of financial reports. One invoice caught his attention. Then another. The numbers didn't make sense. Construction costs. Consulting fees. Vendor payments. Millions of dollars. All approved by one signature. Damien Bradford. Randolph slowly reached for the telephone. Linda. Yes, Mr. Prescott? Tomorrow morning. I want every original contract on my desk. Outside his office, Damien watched through the glass wall. He couldn't hear the conversation, but he recognized the look on Randolph's face. And for the first time in years, Damien Bradford was afraid. Damien Bradford didn't wait for the audit. He knew exactly what Randolph Prescott would find if those original contracts reached the boardroom. For years, small numbers had quietly become large ones. A consulting fee here, a construction adjustment there. Individually, nothing looked suspicious. Together, they told a very different story. That night, Damien made a decision. If Randolph couldn't be distracted, he would be delayed. The next morning, Randolph left headquarters earlier than usual. He planned to meet the company's outside auditors before the afternoon board meeting. His longtime driver, Charles, followed the familiar highway toward downtown Cleveland. Rain had begun falling. Traffic moved slowly. Halfway across the bridge, Randolph pressed a hand against his chest. Charles noticed immediately. "Sir?" Randolph tried to answer. Instead, his breathing became shallow. The color slowly drained from his face. Charles reached for his phone, then looked ahead. Traffic had completely stopped. Construction. 2 separate accidents. Emergency vehicles trapped nearly half a mile away. He whispered, "Come on." But nothing moved. Not 1 inch. Almost 2 miles behind them, Miles Mercer was returning from a fleet service call with Tyler. Their service truck carried tools, diagnostic equipment, and emergency repair supplies. Tyler glanced ahead. "Looks like another traffic jam." Miles slowed the truck, then noticed something unusual. An older man was waving desperately beside a black luxury sedan. Not angry. Not impatient. Panicked. Miles pulled onto the shoulder. Before the truck had fully stopped, Charles ran toward them. "Please. I need help. My boss can't breathe." Without asking another question, Miles grabbed the emergency medical kit they always carried for roadside service calls. Some moments in life don't give us time to decide whether someone deserves our help. They simply reveal who we have already become. Character isn't built during a crisis. A crisis only introduces it to the world. Miles reached the sedan. The moment he looked inside, he froze. Randolph Prescott. For the briefest second, he recognized the man. Then recognition disappeared. All he saw was someone who needed help. Miles. Tyler handed him the medical bag. Randolph's breathing had become weaker. Miles spoke calmly. "Mr. Prescott. Can you hear me?" Randolph opened his eyes just enough to nod. "Good. Stay with me. We've got you." Charles looked helpless. "The ambulance. They're stuck." Miles looked toward the line of stopped traffic, then made a decision. "Tyler. Bring the service truck. We're taking him ourselves." Charles stared at him. "Can we do that?" Miles nodded. "We're losing time. Working together." They carefully helped Randolph into the back of the service truck. Tyler switched on the hazard lights. Miles climbed behind the wheel. Using the emergency shoulder, he headed toward St. Vincent Medical Center. Every second mattered. Back at Prescott Automotive, Vanessa sat through another meeting, unaware her father had never arrived. Her phone suddenly vibrated. "Charles." She answered immediately. "Charles?" His voice trembled. "Miss Prescott. Your father collapsed." Vanessa stood so quickly her chair tipped backward. "What hospital?" Charles answered. "St. Vincent." There was a long pause. Then he quietly added, "The man driving him there is the mechanic." Vanessa closed her eyes. She didn't need to ask which mechanic. She already knew. St. Vincent Medical Center came into view. Miles pulled the service truck beneath the emergency entrance. Before the vehicle had fully stopped, doctors and nurses rushed outside with a stretcher. Randolph Prescott was quickly taken inside. Charles remained close behind. Vanessa arrived less than 5 minutes later. Her luxury sedan stopped so abruptly that a security officer turned toward the sound. She stepped out without noticing anyone around her. Her eyes searched only one face. Miles Mercer. He stood quietly near the entrance. His work shirt was still stained with grease. Rainwater dripped from his sleeves. He looked exactly the same as the day she had thrown his invoice onto the marble floor. Only now, she was the one walking toward him. She stopped a few feet away. Neither of them spoke. Finally, Vanessa lowered her head. "My father." Miles nodded gently. "The doctors are with him." She swallowed hard. "You didn't have to stop." Miles looked through the hospital doors. There wasn't time to think about who he was. There was only time to help. For the first time in years, Vanessa had no answer. Sometimes life doesn't ask us to forgive someone before we've finished hurting. Sometimes it simply places another person's life in our hands and quietly watches what we choose to do. Mercy has never depended on whether someone deserves it. It depends on who we decide to become when no one can force us to be kind. Nearly an hour later, a physician walked into the waiting area. The room immediately became silent. "Mr. Prescott is stable. We expect a full recovery." Vanessa closed her eyes. The breath she had been holding finally escaped. She turned toward Miles. Tears filled her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you." Miles smiled softly. "You already have." She looked confused. "I have?" "You reminded me today that no amount of money can decide whose life is worth saving." Vanessa covered her face. Every word felt heavier than the last. "I've wanted to apologize for a long time. I just never had the courage." Miles remained quiet. She continued. "I humiliated you. I refused to pay you. I acted like your work didn't matter. And today, you saved the only family I have." Miles looked at her for a long moment. Then he quietly reached into his work bag. He removed an old clipboard. Folded neatly beneath the clip was the same unpaid invoice. $1,840. The corner was still slightly bent. Vanessa recognized it instantly. Her hands began to tremble. "I kept it," Miles said calmly. "Not because of the money, but because I never wanted to forget the kind of man I promised my mother I would remain." Vanessa slowly reached for her checkbook. "I'll pay every penny. With interest." Miles gently closed the clipboard. "No." She stared at him. "No? I've already been paid." She frowned. "I don't understand." Miles smiled. "The day I walked out of your mansion, I kept something much more valuable than a check. My self-respect." Neither of them noticed. Across the waiting room, Pearl Whitaker had quietly arrived. She had spoken with Miriam earlier that morning. Now she simply watched from a distance. A gentle smile crossed her face. The promise Miles had made over dinner months ago had finally come full circle. At that same moment, across town, federal investigators entered Prescott Automotive headquarters carrying sealed evidence boxes. Damian Bradford looked up from his office. He immediately understood. The audit had reached him, and there was nowhere left to hide. Randolph Prescott opened his eyes just after sunrise. The first face he recognized was Vanessa's. She was sitting beside his hospital bed. No makeup. No phone in her hand. Just a daughter who had nearly lost her father. Randolph smiled weakly. I guess I'm still here. Vanessa laughed through her tears. Yes. And you have someone else to thank. Randolph slowly turned his head. Miles stood quietly near the doorway, ready to leave before anyone noticed him. Mr. Mercer. Miles stepped closer. Good morning. Randolph extended his hand. You didn't just save my life. You gave me another chance to fix the mistakes I should have seen much sooner. Miles shook his hand gently. I'm just glad you're going home. Randolph looked toward Vanessa. Pay him. Miles smiled before she could speak. Your father already tried. And just like before. My answer hasn't changed. Vanessa lowered her eyes. She understood exactly what he meant. Some debts are measured in dollars. Others are measured in character. Money can settle an account. It cannot rewrite a memory. The beautiful thing about forgiveness is that it doesn't erase the past. It simply refuses to let the past decide the future. Later that afternoon, Randolph returned to Prescott Automotive headquarters. The building felt strangely quiet. Employees whispered as he walked through the lobby. Conference room doors remained closed. The investigation had spread through every department. Inside the executive boardroom, Damian Bradford sat across from two attorneys and several investigators. Boxes filled with financial records covered the long table. Randolph entered without saying a word. Damian stood. I can explain. Randolph calmly shook his head. I've spent too many years accepting explanations. Today, I'm interested in facts. One investigator slid a document across the table. Unauthorized transfers. False consulting contracts. Shell vendors. Millions of dollars diverted over several years. Each page carried Damian's approval. The room remained silent. Finally, Damian lowered his head. There was nothing left to deny. By the end of the day, his employment ended. The investigation continued. Randolph looked out the boardroom window toward the city skyline. He wasn't thinking about the money. He was thinking about the mechanic who had repaired something far more valuable than an engine. That evening, Vanessa drove alone to Warehouse 7. The garage had already closed. Only one light remained on. Miles was organizing tools for the next morning. She stepped inside quietly. I won't keep you long. Miles looked up. What can I do for you? Vanessa placed a small envelope on the workbench. It isn't money. Miles didn't touch it. What is it? A copy of the property deed. He looked confused. The land where your first garage stood. I bought it. I've transferred it into a community trust. No luxury development. No commercial project. It'll become a vocational training center for young mechanics. She paused. It'll be called the Mercer Workshop. Miles looked at her. Then slowly pushed the envelope back. It shouldn't carry my name. Vanessa smiled for the first time without pride. Maybe not. But every young person who learns there should know why honesty matters. Miles said nothing. Outside, Pearl Whitaker stood beside her car. She had arrived only moments earlier. She saw Vanessa leave with lighter shoulders than when she entered. She looked toward the illuminated garage. Then quietly whispered to herself. Kindness always travels farther than the person who starts it. She smiled. Because she knew there was still one final chapter left to tell. The following spring, the old building where Mercer Auto Repair had once stood opened its doors again. Not as a luxury showroom. Not as another corporate office. But as a vocational training center for young mechanics who simply needed someone to believe in them. A modest bronze plaque rested beside the entrance. It didn't mention awards. It didn't mention money. It simply read, Integrity builds more than engines. Miles stood quietly near the back of the crowd. Exactly where he wanted to be. Pearl Whitaker stood beside him. So, what do you think? Miles smiled. I think they'll build something better than I ever did. Pearl gently laughed. No. They'll build it because you showed them how. Inside the workshop, dozens of young apprentices gathered around worn workbenches. Some came from foster homes. Some had lost parents. Some had simply never met an adult who expected anything good from them. For the first lesson, Miles didn't begin with an engine. He placed an old clipboard on the table. The same clipboard. The same invoice. $1,840. The folded corner was still there. One of the students finally asked, "Why did you keep an unpaid bill?" Miles looked around the room. Because every time I looked at it, I remembered there are two ways to become wealthy. You can collect more money. Or you can become the kind of person money can never buy. The room became completely quiet. Sometimes people believe the greatest victories happen when we finally receive what we deserve. I've learned something different. The greatest victories happen when life gives us every reason to become bitter, and we quietly choose to become better instead. That choice rarely changes only one life. It travels farther than we will ever live long enough to see. Months later, Randolph Prescott officially retired. Before leaving the company, he introduced one final policy. Every Prescott Automotive employee would complete annual customer service training at the Mercer workshop. Not to learn how to repair engines. To learn how to treat people. Vanessa attended the very first class. She sat in the last row. Said very little. Listened to every word. When the session ended, she waited until everyone else had left. Then quietly walked toward Miles. I still think about that day. Miles nodded. So do I. She looked down. If I could change one moment, I would. Miles smiled gently. I believe you. She looked up. You do? I do. Because the woman standing here today would never throw that invoice on the floor. For the first time, Vanessa smiled without hiding behind success. Without pride. Without fear. Just gratitude. As the sun began to set, Pearl slowly locked the workshop doors. She looked through the front window one last time. Young mechanics were still laughing while putting away their tools. Miles was helping one apprentice finish rebuilding an old engine. Nobody noticed Pearl quietly walking toward her car. She didn't need them to. Some stories don't end with applause. They end with the quiet certainty that one act of kindness has already begun another. And perhaps, years from now, one of those young mechanics would stop to help a stranger on the side of the road. Not because someone told him to, but because kindness, like honesty, is always repaired one person at a time. Thank you for spending your time with this story. If it reminded you that character is worth more than comfort, or that kindness has a way of returning when we least expect it, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, take care of the people around you. You never know whose life may quietly change because you chose to do the right thing.